When someone asks you, what was the greatest season a quarterback has ever had in the modern NFL era, there are at least a few specific years that will force their way into the front of your brain. 2007 Tom Brady, 2013 Peyton Manning, and 2020 Aaron Rodgers may be some that come to mind simply because of the dominance displayed by these quarterbacks in those seasons. Just like any position in any sport, the role of quarterback has adapted and shifted from year to year and generation to generation based on the rules and simply the evolution of the game as a whole. While not as dramatic as the demands on what tight ends are asked to do, or the complete shift and abandonment of retaining a top end running back, the quarterback position has seen its fair share of motion in adapting to what works best in the league to stay ahead of NFL defenses. Defenses that have become faster and stronger over the years, but have also seen the rulebook become their greatest obstacle, meaning that the quarterbacks that succeed in the modern NFL are not only gifted athletes, but also master tacticians required to think quickly and make the right decisions 2 steps ahead of their opponents. 2024 has been a year where we have seen a number of spectacular quarterbacks compete at a high level, a level that would have been MVP caliber in many other seasons perhaps. But while this isn't a video dedicated to prematurely crowning any of the MVP candidates, there is a candidate who has had a year that solidly falls into place as one of the greatest seasons in the modern NFL. What Lamar Jackson has done in 2024 as the quarterback for the Baltimore Ravens not only exceeds almost every preconceived limit that many have placed on him, but he has ascended into the top tier of quarterback play in every category, commanding one of the most prolific offenses in NFL history. But don't just take my word for it. Allow me to provide the necessary proof to that claim as we take a closer look at several of the best quarterback seasons over the last 20 years. Seasons that have seen record after record shattered before us, and you can come to your own conclusions about the inclusion of Lamar Jackson's 2024 season into the category of greatest quarterback seasons. Let's get to it. Welcome in, everyone. This is Jordan with Ravens Flash Report, and today I'm going to be taking you through not only some of the best seasons great quarterbacks have had over the past 2 decades, but how Lamar Jackson's performance this year compares to them and in some areas where he exceeds them. So go ahead and give the video a like if you enjoy, subscribe and turn notifications on if you're new, and don't forget to put your thoughts and opinions about Lamar Jackson's season down in the comments section below. Now, I don't want to lose anyone too quickly, but I wanted to briefly explain what I mean by modern NFL era. As I stated, and many of us know, what has been asked of certain positions and position groups in the NFL and their role in the game has changed throughout the NFL's existence. Where once the fullback was a highly respected and heavily utilized position, we now see very few teams even employ one, let alone use one. Likewise, we have seen the role of tight end expanded to the point where several have become their team's most dominant offensive weapon. Even in the last 20 years, many changes and advancements have been made to the quarterback position, and therefore, the players themselves have had to change. Meaning a quarterback from the 1980s may or may not succeed in today's NFL, despite their skills and accomplishments when they played. After Lamar Jackson declared to enter the NFL draft following his 2017 college season, many NFL franchises were unsure of what to make of the former Heisman winner and what his future in the league might be. But that's far in the past now, and long gone are the days where certain NFL executives requested his participation in wide receiver drills at the NFL Combine. Lamar has won 2 MVPs since becoming the Ravens' starting quarterback in 2019, and while they were both near unanimous, it was obvious to many that the upper limits of Lamar's growth were still on the horizon of his NFL career, and that his potential has only started to be revealed. But before we delve into both the production numbers and unforeseen hurdles that have defined Lamar's season, let's take a look at these so-called great quarterback seasons I keep mentioning. The first is Peyton Manning's 2004 MVP season with the Indianapolis Colts. Peyton didn't throw for the most yards that year, he didn't have the highest completion percentage either. His team didn't even have the most wins. But what he did do was score. A lot. Manning threw for a then NFL record 49 passing touchdowns, and he did it with efficiency. Dante Culpepper outthrew everyone that year and had the second most passing touchdowns, but his second place was still 10 touchdowns less than Manning's, and his second place passer rating, a respectable 110.9, was also significantly under Manning's 121.1, which marked the highest ever single-season passer rating at the time by nearly 10 points. Our next season is only 3 years away, and we have already mentioned it. Brady's 2007 season, the first and, at the time, only unanimous MVP season by any player. Unlike in Peyton's 2004 season, there was little Brady didn't lead the league in: passing yards, completion percentage, touchdowns, of which he threw 50, which was a new record, yards per game, and, unsurprisingly, passer rating. Tom didn't just acquire all of these stats in garbage time. He got them winning all 16 games of the regular season, leading an offense that was averaging 36.8 points per game. As the first ever unanimous MVP winner, it's not surprising that Brady's 2007 season is still considered by many to be the greatest of all time. And while our next entry isn't a 16-0 earth scorcher like 2007, Tom Brady still crushed the league in 2010, finishing 14-2 and leading once again in passing touchdowns, highest touchdown percentage, lowest interception percentage, and passer rating. This season may not have had the same jaw-dropping numbers as his 2007 season, or even Peyton's 2004 one, but Brady still led the highest scoring offense in the league and dominated nearly everyone throughout the entire regular season. We don't have to travel far ahead to get to the next entry, because in 2011, we saw Aaron Rodgers take over the NFL, leading his Green Bay Packers to a 14-1 regular season record. Rodgers' only loss on the season came at the hands of the Kyle Orton-led Kansas City Chiefs, which was also Rodgers' worst game statistically of the season and one of his only 2 games with a passer rating under 100. And that is what Rodgers is known for in this 2011 season, setting the all-time highest single-season passer rating at a ridiculous 122.5. Rodgers' efficiency was off the charts in 2011, with a completion percentage of 68.3 and throwing 45 touchdowns to only 6 interceptions. As previously mentioned, his one loss to the Chiefs was his worst game, as well as the only one he threw less than 2 touchdowns the whole season, as he led the NFL's number 1 offense, averaging 35 points per game, to the best record in the storied franchise's history. Our next great season comes from a familiar face, but sporting a different color scheme this time: Peyton Manning's 2013 season with the Denver Broncos. Manning led all quarterbacks in passes both attempted and completed, as well as passing yards, where he set a record that still stands today, throwing for 5,477 yards, just a single yard more than Drew Brees' record set 2 years earlier in 2011. Another record Manning broke this year was the single-season passing touchdown record of 50, set by Tom Brady in 2007. But Manning didn't beat the record by just a single touchdown. He beat it by 5, tossing an incredible 55 touchdowns in one season. Unsurprisingly, that meant that he led the NFL's top-scoring offense, which outscored the next highest team by 161 points, averaging an astounding 37.9 points per game that season, with a 13-3 record. The next entry is by a quarterback that could honestly have his own separate list, but for Drew Brees, we're going to focus on his 2018 season. This selection may surprise some of you, as Brees has had other seasons where he's had more production, such as his previously mentioned 2011 season where he set the new passing yards record. However, during the 2018 season, Brees was at his best, having his highest completion percentage and highest passer rating, while delivering his most efficient passing season, throwing for nearly 4,000 yards, 32 touchdowns, and only 5 interceptions on his second fewest pass attempts in his 20-year career. All of this on top of leading the Saints to a 13-2 record when Brees was under center, and a 13-3 record overall, meaning the only game Brees sat out, which was the finale, the team lost, as he was the greatest driving factor for their success that season, where he would finish second for the MVP award for the 4th time. The player that won that 2018 MVP award in his first year as a starter happens to be the next entry on our list: Patrick Mahomes. Being drafted in 2017 and sitting behind veteran quarterback Alex Smith for his first full season allowed Mahomes to absorb the Chiefs' offense, which he then took the league by storm with in 2018. The 23-year-old Mahomes was an instant success, exploding into the league, winning his first 5 games and averaging 302.6 passing yards per game over that span, tossing 14 touchdowns and only 2 interceptions in those games. Mahomes would finish his first season as a full-time starter, becoming only the 3rd player in NFL history to throw at least 50 passing touchdowns, in addition to finishing second in passer rating to Drew Brees with a 113.8, as well as in passing yards to Ben Roethlisberger with 5,097 yards. Mahomes would lead his Chiefs to a 12-4 record as he commanded the highest scoring offense in the NFL that year, averaging 35.3 points per game. And now we get into the final and most recent entry deserving to be included on this list, and it's another player that we've seen on here before: Aaron Rodgers in 2020. Rodgers once again showed his incredible passing prowess by not only leading the league in passing touchdowns with 48, but doing so while completing a league-high 70.7% of his passes and only throwing 5 interceptions all year for a nearly 10-to-1 ratio. Rodgers finished the season with a 13-3 record for the second year in a row and with a passer rating of 121.5, which is currently the second highest of all time and only 1 point behind his 2011 record of 122.5. The 2020 season also marked the third time Rodgers would win MVP honors, as well as the highest passing success rate of his career. Now, comparing these great seasons is of course subjective in nature because while the stats and rankings themselves may be an objective fact, it's almost impossible to accurately measure which statistical category matters more than others. So, what stats make a season great for a quarterback? Number of touchdowns scored, passing yard totals, passer rating, or is the only stat that truly matters the number of wins they have at the end of a season? An interesting and unintended coincidence of that list is that all of those quarterbacks have won at least one Super Bowl in their careers, but not one of them won a Super Bowl in any of the years that I just listed for each of them. In 2020, Rodgers didn't win the Super Bowl. Tom Brady did with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. In 2013, Peyton Manning didn't win the Super Bowl with the Broncos. They were defeated by Russell Wilson and the Seattle Seahawks. And probably the most famous of these examples is in Tom Brady's 2007 season, where the Patriots won every game they played in before ultimately losing to Eli Manning of the New York Giants in the Super Bowl that year. Now, as I said, this was a coincidence that was by no means intentional when creating this list of great quarterback seasons, but it does illustrate the point I was just making about what stats make a quarterback season great. In 2019, Lamar Jackson, just like Patrick Mahomes in the year prior, won his first MVP award after leading the Ravens to a record of 14-2 in just his first year as a starter. On top of that, Jackson was just the second quarterback ever to win the award unanimously. So, knowing all of this, you might imagine that Lamar Jackson's 2019 season was the height of his performance. In some ways, it was. He broke the single-season quarterback rushing record previously held by Michael Vick. He led the league in touchdown passes with 36 while only throwing 6 interceptions, and he also led the league in rushing yards per attempt as well as the highest passer rating. But despite all of these incredible accomplishments and production, Lamar, coincidentally, also lost in the postseason before ever reaching the Super Bowl. But in some ways, his loss in the postseason to the Tennessee Titans may have been his one step backwards before he took 2 steps forward, potentially being at the time an unknown catalyst to Jackson's continued growth. See, many NFL fans weren't sold on the idea that Lamar and the Ravens could win it all with a record-setting rushing-based attack that was the cornerstone of their 2019 offensive identity. Some even went so far as to say the polar opposite offensive scheme was necessary to win in the modern NFL. But the 2024 Baltimore Ravens, with offensive coordinator Todd Monken calling the shots, have developed potentially one of the most balanced run-to-pass offenses in the history of the NFL. So let's now look into the incredible season Lamar Jackson is having and why it may end up being looked upon as one of the greatest quarterback seasons in the modern NFL. First and foremost, one of the criticisms often levied against Lamar is throughout the early part of his career under offensive coordinator Greg Roman, he was not viewed as a typical drop-back quarterback and struggled if his unique ability to create plays with his legs was restricted or outright stopped. This often contributed to the narrative that he was unwilling or unable to stay in the pocket and beat opponents with his arm alone. However, much like the requests for Lamar to run wide receiver drills at the Combine, few now question Lamar's ability to take apart an NFL defense without ever leaving the pocket. His 4 games with a perfect passer rating, the most by any quarterback ever, put that debate quickly to bed. Lamar is unique, even in the world of professional athletics. The incredible athleticism he possesses is rarely seen at his position, and when we have seen other dual-threat quarterbacks, they typically lean into one area more than the other, and even when they do, they don't reach the levels of ability and success Lamar has achieved. But before we venture too far into what he does with his legs, let's first compare how his passing ability this year matches up with the other great seasons we've looked at. At the conclusion of the 17-game season, Lamar ranks 6th in total passing yards, 2nd in passing touchdowns, 1st in passer rating, 1st in passing touchdown percentage, and 1st in total offense. Despite this top-tier production, Lamar's passing game has always centered around his efficiency. In 2024, Lamar was 6th in passing yards, as I stated before, but he was just 16th in passing attempts, once again emphasizing his efficiency. In fact, everyone on this list threw the ball considerably more than Lamar has throughout his career. Aaron Rodgers has averaged 565 passing attempts per season. Manning averaged 599. Brady 611, Brees 625, and Mahomes is averaging 633 attempts per season. Lamar, by comparison, has only averaged 427 attempts through his 7 years, and although this season saw Lamar attempt more passes than any year prior, his 474 is almost 100 fewer than the lowest average on this list, Aaron Rodgers. Lamar makes up for this by having the highest yards per catch out of everyone here, averaging 11.9 per reception, as well as tying for the top spot with Mahomes for yards per attempt at 7.8 per pass. And while this indicates that Lamar throws downfield more than the others, he clearly makes it count, sporting the highest career touchdown percentage rate with a 6.4%, which also leads all active players. Lamar is also smart when throwing, as he has only averaged 8 interceptions per season, which is tied with Rodgers, who just so happens to be the all-time leader in lowest interception percentage in league history. But now, let's finally get into what many of you have probably been waiting for, the raw number comparison. Let's look at it in a simple chart to lay it all out there, and we can see apples to apples how these seasons look when comparing what many would consider the most relevant stats. Starting with one of the most controversial stats when concerning individual quarterback performance is overall record or win percentage. Obviously, Brady from 2007 takes the cake as the only quarterback to have a perfect regular season in the modern era, but between defenses letting guys down, close games lost or won, and an extra week added in 2021, there are a lot of variables these quarterbacks can't control. At least we can take out the weeks guys were inactive, which can be common at the end of the season if a team has done remarkably well. Next, we have completion percentage, which is a great metric for judging the effective accuracy of a quarterback while not relying as heavily on differences between players' attempts versus completion numbers, which, as we can see, varies quite a bit. We can also see how these stats can be drastically different for two quarterbacks in one area, but eerily similar to others. For example, we see Brees in 2018 and Brady in 2010 had nearly identical passing attempts and were only separated by 92 yards. But Brees has by far the highest completion percentage of the bunch, while Brady in 2010 had by far the worst. Speaking of passing yardage, this is the stat that by far is the most heavily influenced by how many passing attempts a quarterback has in a season. This is quite obvious as the quarterbacks with the top 3 passing attempts in each season also had the highest number of passing yards in addition to the highest number of passing touchdowns. Manning had 659 passing attempts in 2013, which definitely helped him in setting the NFL record in both yards with 5,477 and touchdowns with 55. Mahomes in 2018 threw the ball 580 times for 5,097 yards and 50 touchdowns, and finally Brady in 2007, who attempted 578 passes for 4,806 yards and 50 touchdowns as well. This actually makes Lamar's passing production in 2024 even more impressive, as the reverse is true as well, with Brees from 2018 and Brady from 2010 having the second and third fewest passing attempts in a season from this list, and they have the fewest yards and passing touchdowns as well. So it's significant that Lamar has the fewest passing attempts by far on the list with only 474, and yet has more passing yards and passing touchdowns than either Brees or Brady in those respective years, while also tying for the fewest interceptions in a season with Brady from 2010 with only 4. And as for interceptions, we see a similar trend which basically boils down to the more you throw, the higher chance you have of being intercepted. But even with this metric, Lamar goes above and beyond as the first player in NFL history to have at least 40 passing touchdowns and under 5 interceptions throughout a whole season. Not to mention that everyone else on this list played at least 1, if not 2, fewer games than Lamar did in 2024. There's little argument that having fewer interceptions is good, but when that interception number and interception rate are so low, combined with a very high touchdown percentage, that's where we see even more of Lamar's nearly exponential growth in the passing game. When it comes to passer rating as a metric for measuring the success and effectiveness of a quarterback, it's sometimes thought of as an antiquated stat, as it doesn't take into account other aspects of a quarterback's play, such as running with the ball. Even if that is the case, it would actually make Lamar's season even more impressive, as he not only led the league in passer rating, he had the 4th highest single-season rating in NFL history and now sits at number 3 overall career-wise, only 0.1 behind second place Patrick Mahomes and 0.6 behind the leader Aaron Rodgers. As I said, this rating is a purely passing measurement, and so we see not only how wrong many have been about Lamar throughout his career by questioning his ability to beat opponents with his arm, but that he is in fact one of the best throwers of the football in league history. The final two stats I have up here are sacks and yards per attempt. And while these do play a factor in determining how good a quarterback is at avoiding pressure and how effective he is with his arm downfield, there are caveats as well. For sacks, I don't think anyone would say that Tom Brady or Peyton Manning are more agile than Lamar Jackson or even Patrick Mahomes, but they may have had a better O-line in front of them. Lamar started the season with 3 first-time starters on his O-line, including essentially 2 rookies and a converted offensive tackle. As for yards per attempt, this is just here to show that while Lamar certainly doesn't attempt as many passes as the others here, he is just as effective, and if he did end up throwing the ball 500 times a season, he would be right up there from a yardage and touchdown perspective with Manning, Brady, and Mahomes. So, all of that focuses on how Lamar's 2024 season belongs with these others just from his passing performance alone. But as we all know, Lamar has more talents than just throwing the ball. This is what the yardages and touchdowns would look like in these seasons if we added each quarterback's rushing numbers. Not only do we see a surprising amount of these quarterbacks added meaningful yardage with their legs, but also meaningful touchdowns as well. However, no one is even remotely close to Lamar Jackson, who was not only the first quarterback to ever have 4,000 passing yards and 800 rushing yards in a season, he's the first to ever have 4,000 passing yards and 900 rushing yards in a single season. The term dual threat is one often attributed to quarterbacks who can scramble and get outside the pocket to extend plays and then throw the ball downfield. But when Lamar Jackson came into the league, and especially in 2023 and 2024, the term dual threat had to take on a new meaning, because no one was doing what Lamar was able to do from a passing and running gameplay style. Lamar set multiple franchise records this season, including, of course, passing touchdowns, but also led the team to a franchise-high 7,224 offensive yards. Their third season with over 3,000 rushing yards, becoming the first team ever to have 4,000 passing and 3,000 rushing in a single season. And finally, passing Michael Vick to become the quarterback with the most rushing yards in NFL history, a lead he will now ultimately build upon for the next several years. Every one of these 6 quarterbacks are phenomenal and unique in their own way, but Lamar is more unique than all of them. He embodies the playground style, but with elite precision and ability. He is the infinity plus one in an argument of standard quarterback play, and whether you agree with me or not is irrelevant, because Lamar never cared for comparison or personal glory. Lamar has always been and will always be a team-first player, and while I sit here and tell you how great and amazing these quarterback seasons are in front of you, he would disagree and say they are not the greatest ever, because he would ask one question: did they win the Super Bowl? So while the 2024 regular season is over, the 2025 postseason is about to begin, and we will see if Lamar can break the trend of all of these other great quarterbacks by not just having an all-time great regular season, but adding a Lombardi trophy at the end to top it all off. Thank you for watching this video, and I hope you enjoyed it. Here's to 2025, and as always, stay safe out there, and go Ravens.